Hey, everybody. Hi. Welcome back to the implementation zone, the Create Implementation Zone at NAB 2022. My name is Cassidy Pearsall. I am with the ARRI Solutions team as an application engineer, and I am a content enthusiast. I'm here with our 3 content partners that we worked with for this show, providing Unreal 4.27 assets to us for use with NDisplay in order to create a really lovely virtual experience for us all here today. So, gentlemen, I'm actually going to have you introduce yourselves, your titles, maybe a little bit about your background, and then your companies and where their focus is. You want to start with Sinan?
All right.
We'll go down the line.
Do it. Hello, everyone. I'm Sinan AlRubaye. By the way, I'm a cover-up for Igor, so I wasn't even supposed to be here, but COVID. I'm the Chief Experience Officer of ICVR. We are a interactive content creation studio. Originally, we come from game development industry, so our core business is game development. In the past couple of years, we got into virtual production. And we have been approaching it from 2 sides, the VAT side and the engineering and pipeline side as well.
My name is Felix. I'm the CEO at Happy Mushroom and founder. My experience is in previs and in VFX. I was the virtual art department supervisor on Jungle Book. After that, I worked as the virtual art department supervisor for The Mandalorian. We've been privileged enough to do some of the largest shows using this technology, from all of the Lucasfilm projects that are currently coming out to some of the largest Netflix ones, some WB, and so I'm excited to be here and share some of my experience.
Hey everybody, I'm Dan Pack, Managing Director and one of the founding partners of Silver Spoon. We're a real-time animation, AR, XR, motion capture studio, originally founded in Brooklyn, but also in LA. We've done a number of really what I would consider kind of the hardest and the projects that people wouldn't normally want to do in real time. First to do real-time crowd simulation a few years ago for Fox Sports. We did first ever real-time avatar singing competition show called Alter Ego last summer.
Great show.
And, we continue to push the boundaries in terms of real-time content creation.
All right, so my first question, I think, will contextualize a lot of the conversation that we'll kind of follow. We're going to kind of, gloss over a little bit about the how-tos of virtual production here and talk more about the industry as a large and where we see that is going. As you can see, here we are sitting in an Unreal 4.27 asset provided to us by Silver Spoon of a broadcast studio created custom for us here. So we're doing this for in-cam VFX to give the illusion that we're actually in this physical space where we're actually here sitting in front of an LED wall. So there's a lot of different applications for this technology across different industries, most obviously the entertainment industry, where we can do really complicated shoots for film, live television, and live events in general. So I think what would be great to talk about is a little bit of how post is moving into pre, and how your different companies in your very different industry sectors deal with these kinds of questions, and maybe specifically some of the more outlandish ideas that come from clients, and how you begin to tackle those in pre-production, and how your former experience might inform those choices.
I'll start it off first. I think, the question that we ask ourselves every time we're doing some type of an in-camera VFX show is why? Why are you doing the content this way? People will come and say, well, we want the entire environment to be done in Unreal, all the trees, all the vehicles, all the assets, all the people, and we've got, or especially on commercials, we say we've got 7 days to do it before we shoot, and that's just a lot of times just not feasible. And so you have to ask yourself why. Why do I need this entire environment to be done this way? Especially if you're looking for a highly photographic asset. And I would say one of the things that, it's not maybe as sexy or as fun, but entertaining this idea of doing 2.5D or just doing plates. I think there's a lot of ways that you can mix and match and approach things so that it's smart, it's economical, it's efficient, and it looks badass in camera.
I'm going to bounce off of that one. I think when most people come to me, I find that they're suffering of FOMO, fear of missing out. And so one of the main things that I lean into is asking them, what is it that they're hoping to achieve at the end? And if it's using Unreal, then how about we use it to plan the production and use the tech to not just shove the shot into something that's not appropriate for the shot, but find the best technique that is to use. I mean, we can use LED, we could use the ARRI for a traditional shoot with NCAM, we could use it in a multitude of ways. So when I think of virtual production, I actually think of planning and applying the virtual production not only to the shoot itself, but to the art department and helping the producers, the production designers, and the DPs plan way in advance. And then from there we go, okay, what's the percentage that goes into in-camera effects? But starting with training those creators first.
Yeah, plus one on what you both said, and I would add one more thing, which is, with prioritizing all that work and moving it up front, it comes with also understanding timelines and budget, right? Because it used to be the majority of budget is saved to post, but that's not the case anymore. You actually need a big portion of that in pre-production, because that's where you're planning your shots, you're blocking your shots, you're building these environments, you're building these assets, not to be thrown away in post, but actually to take them and finish them. So it's been like a culture shift, more or less, at least from our own experience.
Oh, do you have another comment?
I was going to add one thing, and some of this might change once more of the industry moves to Unreal Engine 5 and 5.1 comes out, and more of the features of being able to load these really heavy scenes into it. I think obviously a lot of misconceptions for post is that you could build these really big, beautiful scenes and then try to bring them into Engine, and it just isn't performant. And so one of the most important things that we try to educate everybody on from post VFX is the importance of optimization and of testing content. Because a lot of times there are things that we could pre-bake, there are things that we could render out in advance of our shoot date that are not going to affect the director's ability to be able to iterate on set still.
I think for some people who might have not worked in a virtual production situation, it might be good to kind of go through maybe a standard or maybe like the most average pre-production process in terms of timeline. So how much is dedicated to creative? How much is dedicated to actual physical production of any set pieces or other elements like that? How much is dedicated to shoot, pre-light, just roughly, would you say, for maybe I would just say, well, you can choose a different type of industry or experience, maybe that's more specific to your company, and kind of go into that. Maybe we can contrast commercials and live production and maybe film.
When it comes to timelines, the content dictates a lot of that, but I think virtual production is a lot like production, or if you mirror it, it's almost identical. So if you grab the roles and you say, a production designer needs to build a physical set. He also has to build the virtual version. And when you're building a physical set, there's a design. That sketch then needs to turn into a plan, and then that plan then needs to be created for the physical set. That also has to happen with the virtual world. So if you grab the DP, if there wasn't a virtual production aspect to it, he would probably go on location and with his iPhone shoot some stuff. He needs that same amount of time to do it virtually. The producer, same story. So when I think of time, it's important to think of all the different roles that are involved and what is it that they need to be able to make decisions. And so that's how I quantify it. When it comes to the production designer, we try to give them at least 2 to 3 weeks on TV shows, even though some of those sets could be created in a week. However, this is a final decision that they're making prior to the shoot. So you structure things in a way where they're going to have enough time to really commit to something that's going to go till the end of its existence. And so the production designer, we try to work with them for at least 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. We put them in scouts, we give them all these different tools so that they could feel like they could make the final call. The same thing with the DP. The DP, if he's doing lighting pre-lights, physical pre-lights for their construction, for the actual worlds that they would make for real, we're doing virtual pre-lights with them. Those virtual pre-lights, you're going to want to have probably more than 1, 2 at least, maybe 3, and so that turns into 2 to 3 weeks. So although the scale of something is something that looks like it's going to, you could do it in 2 days and you're going to buy it off the market, you have to think about the creatives that actually want to give their romance and how long it's going to take them to commit, to say yes, you could take this and it's going to be the same for the next year through the rest of the production.
And like, and one point you brought up, Cassidy, which is a valid point, which is the scale of production, right? So in this example, which is a perfect example for like a little bit larger production, mid-sized to larger productions, but if you're looking at the higher volume of projects, which is the smaller ones, right? Like smaller budgets. Think of live broadcasts, think of commercials, think of music videos. With these projects, timeline defer them. Again, it's depending on content. So you can go from, we've seen some weird examples from people just getting assets off the store and put it on an LED wall and expect it to perform, which doesn't, if you've tried it, you probably know it doesn't work, to at least the minimum viable time to produce high quality content. We usually, try to ask for like 2 to 3 weeks minimum. Now, over time, we are becoming more efficient, meaning 2 years ago, it used to take 4 to 6 weeks, and now we're down to 2 to 3 weeks because we're learning things, we're automating things, we're making the process faster, right? And then when it comes to like pre-light days, well, we've realized that the more effort we put in while creating content and while doing shot blocking with DP and director, the more dialed in they are throughout the process, the faster the pre-light and kind of pre-shoot timeline is. And that can go to, Felix's point, like 1 or 2 days, and then you go and shoot, because at that point it's like, okay, they have seen exactly how their shot is, their project's going to go. So yeah, scale is really what dictates that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I kind of ascribe to the belief that for virtual production, in order for it to actually move forward, we have to be able to work within the timelines and workflows that have already existed, especially as you as the broadcaster. You're finishing up baseball and you're moving into football. You're not, in an ideal world, you're starting to think about football while you're doing baseball, but the reality is that most of your energy is going to be focused on something else. Yeah. So we have to be able to be adaptable and take those assets and start iterating and working as quickly as possible. So, Alter Ego, in an ideal world, we would have had 6 months to build that project, maybe a year. We wound up building 100 characters and VFX and all this crazy shit in 4 weeks. That's just because that's what unscripted programming is. And I think, again, like what these guys are saying, the industry is building tools. There's a lot of sharing and education that is happening in between vendors. And we're starting to build up those asset libraries in order to be able to just get content out quicker.
I actually want to lean into what you're saying too, again. Once you create those asset libraries, everything's faster, right? It's a matter of, if you think about a TV series, the first season, they need to build all of that from scratch. If you're a construction team, the art director is just going crazy building all of that. The second season, you already have a location built, and you can shoot. And so these are the things that, the efficiencies that you start finding when you actually could work with a team repeatedly.
And even with assets, you guys know, you wouldn't imagine what you can do with changing materials and shaders over an existing asset and make it completely different. You can't even tell if this was the same thing that was used in that show 2 years ago. So yeah, and that's the part of efficiencies, is like you learn as you do, and then you build extensive libraries.
So I'd like to take this opportunity to maybe get a little technical and talk a little bit about software, things like these different asset libraries, the digitization of the real world into the digital. So if you want to talk, I don't know how specific, you can be as specific or non-specific as you like, I guess, but maybe take us through a little bit of your software processes, kind of what you utilize specifically in pre-production, into actual shooting, and maybe any finishing softwares you might use. And then maybe branching off of that, if you utilize any Epic Marketplace assets, any Megascans or anything from the Unity Marketplace, versus potentially scanning or building those assets yourselves.
It's a good point. I again, having started a motion capture studio, I always used to, again, believe everything had to be done in Maya. If you didn't do it in Maya, then it's not worth our time to try to figure out. Ultimately for us now, yes, it's important as a studio to find a workflow and pipeline and try to stick to that as much as possible. But frankly, now with talent being so hard to find and so hard to nurture, and ultimately, since everything winds up in the engine, ultimately, it's more about working in whatever is going to, really allow you to do the job the best. For us, we have found that to be still mostly Maya, a crap ton of Houdini. I think Houdini is one of the most powerful tools that's out there for big procedural modeling, environment creation, Substance. But again, there's great tools. Blender, there's an incredible community of people. For Alter Ego, we used artists, digital fashion designers from around the world that were using a program called Marvelous Designer. And they did incredible work, better work than I've seen from 3D artists doing wardrobe. So I think, I kind of believe that it's less about the tool and more about the artistry and the skill. And obviously a lot of credit goes to our Unreal TAs and Unreal developers who are working an engine to properly make sense of all of it.
I think more than ever, I was an environment artist for 9, 10 years, so things are so easy these days compared to what they used to be. I used to have to paint that rust by hand. Now they have a material that takes care of that. So what is very interesting is that the game engine hosts all of it. So in our studio, we started by creating Happy Mushroom. At Happy Mushroom, we started by using Unreal Engine as the center hub, and we hire Blender guys, 3ds Max guys, Maya guys. You use whatever software you want to model, texture, do the work you want to do, Substance Painter, Houdini, View, etc., to do the talent, but ultimately it's all going to make it into Unreal. And so we've had to create, because they don't exist yet, the Mushroom tools so that they could support all those different softwares importing with the same publisher that's going to give you the same parameters into Unreal. That's going to allow you to hire the best creatives in the world, allow them to work in the software that they would use, but then also have a software, thanks to Epic being so invested in making this a process that's going to work, then now you have one software that could host it all. And yes, they're probably going to have to learn the publisher. But that's really, that's something that you should make simple for them. However, I do think that it's so exciting for me to see my teams now work, because they're working at a speed and they're using software that is quite inviting, but then I can host everything in one place.
Yeah, it's to Felix's point. It's a really tough question. It depends on when you ask it, because 10 years ago it was not what it is today. People moved from 3D Max to Maya, and some people are already moving to Blender, and some use Houdini, some don't. Some finish in Nuke, some don't. And in a year, there's going to be something else. In 2 years, there's going to be something else. In 5 years, there's going to be something else. So the question is really not what the software you use, and at least that's how we see it. It's about what gets you the result you need for your project, right? So we always internally say it's not about, we can't think in a rigid way of, okay, this is what it is, and if it doesn't fit, I'm going to try and force it, and if it doesn't fit, then I can't do it. No, it's more like what the client needs for the project and how do we deliver that, right? And in some cases, we do have an army of artists that's really amazing in, Maya, Blender, 3D Max. We use Houdini, we finish in Nuke. We do all these different compositing softwares as well. But the other side is we use a lot of scan-based assets and environments. So we work a lot with photogrammetry. We have our internal pipelines to process photogrammetry scans as well as laser scans. And, they have their own needs. And to the point of once you build these libraries, then you can go crazy with shaders and materials and create things that these original scans were not intended to do. So that's what we're finding to be the most efficient way.
Because things are so much more efficient and things are so much faster, I lean into the concept. I'm always talking to my artist about high-level concepts. What's the mood? What is the intention? What is the shot trying to get across? Because once you make that decision, the assets come together really quickly, the shot comes together really quickly, and what we find is that people move too quickly past that decision of taking a second to really understand, why is this shot red? Maybe it should be blue because you're trying to give it a different mood. And so we live largely in those concepts, and when we work on projects, we try to look at the entire film or the entire TV series or the entire commercial and live in those low-res color shapes, because photogrammetry, we're doing photogrammetry as well. I'm sure you are as well. The assets and the asset creation has gotten so fast, and as you have those asset libraries, it's going to get even faster. So in my opinion, it's important to take a second and just figure out the product, because that plan is going to take you all the way.
So we've talked a lot right now about our team of artists that everybody has just at the ready to, jump to any kind of different demand from a client, maybe. But I think it would be great to take people through each of your kind of company structure and how the different specific positions for virtual production that people might not be familiar with, and then maybe a little bit about how you guys have found these different types of people or developed these kinds of artists out of people you already had.
I think it's a really good point. I think there's the great thing about the world today is that there's incredible talent everywhere. And again, we saw this on multiple shows that we've done. There's talent in South America, there's talent in this country, there's talent abroad. And for us, what we found is that it's great to take people from all different disciplines. People that are working traditionally in traditional VFX and post, because they have that mindset of really, really high quality. But then also working with people in broadcast who understand that it's important to just be able to iterate really quickly. And I think kind of having this, all these various people who are working across all these different disciplines allow you to actually come up with a product that can be really unique, that is actually going to be performant, that, yeah.
Because of my specialty in art departments, although I'm a previous person, I always worked under production designers and DPs in art departments. It's just a position that I was in over at the third floor. I knew that I wanted to create a workflow that was going to be for production designers, DPs, and art departments. So a lot of our specialty is virtual production for art departments and building those things in a production workflow so that they could make it into the stage on time, because production designers know how to do that. So we knew that we wanted the speed of previs because previs is fast and they understand filmmaking and how to make TV shows and commercials because because they're not worried about fidelity, they're worried about the product and about the mood and what they're getting across. So previs people, we bring them in for their speed, for their layout. Then we look at games because they are now the guys that know how to make those environments and those worlds, but they have a communication gap, right? They may not be able to communicate with a production designer or a DP. So that's something that the previs guy could help the game guy with. And then we have VFX, and the VFX teams are amazing at fidelity. So we bring them in for lighting. All of a sudden, these VFX artists might have access to becoming a DP themselves because they're now the lighting gaffers that are the virtual lighting gaffers. So some of the DPs we work with, they have their favorite gaffer and then they have their favorite virtual gaffer. And so all those key creatives, the production designer, he has his physical construction art director, but he has a Happy Mushroom, he has his art directors for the VAD, for the virtual art department. And so that's how we like to structure our projects. We try to find roles that are going to allow those creatives, the decision makers, to do what they do every day, but in a way that's virtual.
Yeah, our approach was at ICVR was a little bit different because, we come from the game development industry, right? So, we're not film people at heart, like both of you guys. So for us, the technical capability was already there. We already had artists that know exactly how to build worlds and assets and characters at the most efficient way. But what we lacked on was the creative eye for a filmmaker or somebody with even when it comes to visual effects artists. I mean, you guys know it's different to get a visual effects artist for a film than a visual effects artist for a cinematic of a video game, of a AAA game, than somebody who does VFX for games. It's not the same. And so we do have incredible VFX artists, but they specialize in games and video games, right? And those have a different eye, right? So we realized that a couple of years ago, and that came up actually in the language we were earlier talking about, the language between the technical talent and the creative talent. When you talk to filmmakers, they don't really understand what we're talking about, and vice versa. So basically, we're like, all right, so what we need is a talent that understands to a certain extent how the technology works, but they're mostly in the creative world. And that's how we were able to bring these people in. Because to teach the technology is not a problem if you find the right talent, but it's really difficult to teach somebody how to have a creative eye and how to have a taste. Right? That's not something you can easily teach. So that's how we were able to bring the two together. So we have a couple of artists that lead the creative side, and then we have an army of incredible tech artists and 3D artists and 2D artists that can actually produce at a higher pace.
I'm probably speaking for all three of us, but it is a mixture of film, games, creatives, and technical people. And they're like this, right?
Absolutely.
So, a point that I would add, though, too, is that for us at least, we also try to mix in a lot of people who do not come from this world whatsoever. Because again, in order for this to be truly adopted, you need the gaffer or director or DP who really wants to hate this, who wants to make sure that none of this works. That's the person that we're trying to vet. That's what we're after, to make sure that this stands up to whatever they've been using for the last 40 or 50 years. That's how virtual production is going to get adopted. And so you need to involve everybody's opinion. That's the only way that we're going to drive this forward.
I want to add one more thing, which is traditionally in linear production, as a production, you were able to kind of plan. All right, at this time I need this type of talent. At this time I need this type of talent. At this time I don't need these guys until we're in post. That's not a thing anymore. This is not a linear production workflow, so that doesn't work anymore. You need these people to be involved in pre-production to a certain extent, because they will decide and drive how they want to receive these assets and environments when it's time. And they actually make a lot of decisions of how things are built. So that's the other important part here, which is it's not chunks anymore.
I'd like to go into a little bit of why. I think production is 10 times faster now. You got Unreal Engine. If you're going to go to China, you could load it up, put it yourself in a headset, visit it with multiple people at once. So by its nature, if the DP had to go out to China and to go and grab his iPhone and take shots, that's a lot of work. But now I could just bring it to your home. Literally send it to you at your computer at home. You visit that location. That speed applies to all of the roles. So if something took 10 weeks to plan, now it takes 2 weeks. That means that if the production designer maybe wasn't going to involve anyone else months down the road because things move so fast, hey, he might need that cinematographer by week 3. Because by week 3, if he has a library, he might have 10 different environments for you to start putting those iPhone shots down. And though that process is now replicated virtually. So you're not going to visit out there physically, but you will when you put your headset on, or if you do it on a computer just with a mouse, or if you have someone like one of our teams do it for you, you'll have that same experience that you would have, only that in a traditional pipeline it takes a lot longer, but now with the current tools, it's all compressed way early on. So often people ask me, do I really need that role now? They typically come in a lot later. Yes, because your other pipeline was a lot slower. This one's a lot faster.
Add one more thing to this. I know, because it builds
Third
up,
one
right?
more thing.
I promise that's my last point on this. The sweet part about that is, I think most of us here are familiar with linear production and how long you had to wait to see something, and if you don't like it, oh my God. Now that's not the case anymore, because now the iteration happens 2-3 times a week. Like in productions, you do iterate 2-3 times a week. And after every iteration, artists are going back, doing the changes, pushing in source control, and then creative leads review, give feedback and review, give feedback and review. So by the time you get to actual production, you have reviewed, 100 times more before you even step on actual production, which was not a thing. So that's one of the other sweet parts about it. Yeah, I know. We can stay here forever.
We got a while. I don't know. So, it's kind of related. So I think we'll kind of just shift it a little bit. I think that, this is really new to a lot of people that have been doing production for a very long time, and it can be kind of scary. It's been a couple of years into virtual production now, so there's varying levels of experience in the field. A big part of this, especially for each of your companies, is definitely managing client expectations and getting in there early on. What would you say are some of the changes that you've seen over the last couple of years in what clients expect and how you might go about managing those expectations, getting them, kind of prepped for the process, and maybe some new things you've learned over the couple of years that now are kind of you bring in from the front end?
I would say definitely one of the biggest things, and I think what's great now is that there are a bunch of great LED studios popping up and other XR stages that are opening up that understand the process, because we see a lot of really cool, slick produced videos and case studies, and we're probably part of that issue. But the best way to learn is to come into a studio and see it for yourself, and see a bunch of different environments, look behind the camera and actually see what it looks like and how it works. Ask those questions. Until you actually see it and try to use it, it's really still kind of a hard concept to understand.
I agree. I think the thing that I experience the most when I'm supervising projects is overwhelmness and the lack of understanding that we still want to create a healthy environment. And to do so, we all have to have a conversation of how the pipeline is going to change. And I think some people don't want to have the conversation. However, if you don't, it doesn't mean that they're not going to want you to review 10 times as much, because things are happening so fast that maybe you think that, oh, I got 2 weeks to look at that. No, it's tomorrow. And so I think the thing that I apply that I've learned the most is really hopefully having the time with those decision makers to talk about their role and their responsibility, because everything is there. So you might want to make decisions on everything, and that is overwhelming. But the production designer, you're responsible for the set. DP, your camera and lighting. Producer, let's help you with change management, because that's a nightmare now. Everything changes 10 times faster, right? So roles and responsibilities. What's funny is that although it's overwhelming, once you have the conversation, they all calm down, because it's like you're taking all this stuff off their plate. You have a virtual gaffer. You have a virtual sets art director. All these roles are there to support you. Now, let's move forward in a way that's healthy, and let's have the conversation on how to do so.
Yeah, I mean, agreed with all of that, and with expectations, for us at least, one of the most important things is we always avoid and advise other people to avoid is don't promise them the world. Don't overpromise. Please don't do that. If any of you here, please don't overpromise, right? It's a big one. What's important is, at least for us, because we also, not only that, but we also specialize in the pipeline and tooling side. Our job is to make what they want possible. The goal of technology is not to cap the imaginations of creative in a box and be like, well, that's what technology can do, and these are your limits. That's wrong, in our opinion at least. Our job is to use the technology to enable creatives to do what they want and maybe more. That's why when we come in early in projects, basically back to the why you're doing it that you mentioned earlier, Dan, and then how to approach it, and we basically break down what the DP wants to do, what the director wants to do, what the editor wants to do, what all these people want to do, and we make sure that they have the plugins they need, that they have the tools they need, they have the right pipeline that supports that project before they even kick off. Because that's, in our opinion, is how it should be done.
Yeah, just one thing I want to stem off. Honestly, I think one of the easiest ways to go about creating content or doing a shoot, just to get everybody on the same page right off the bat, just do a very down and dirty tech viz or previs. And then you'll see, do I actually need to create this entire amusement park if I'm shooting on a wall that's half this size? Place your camera and your lens in the scene, and you could very quickly see, is this going to work? Do I need to build out this entire environment? Let me get everybody on the same page as far as what the camera movement's going to be, and then we can go into this process a whole lot smarter. And again, the great thing about working in Engine, or an engine with Disguise, or an engine with end displays, that we can keep that entire process self-contained throughout. And previs and tech viz was not something that was done traditionally on commercial production for a long time, but we're seeing so much use out of doing it. Again, it's just working smarter.
I'm a big fan of the tech viz. Tech viz, everyone. Plan those shoots. And the process to get to that tech viz is also super important. we've worked with a multitude of different kinds of DPs, production designers, and so assuming that they all want to work the same way is one of the biggest mistakes we made at the beginning of the company. There's production designers that are going to come with a background for concept art. You know, as a concept artist, that's what they came up as. And for them, we built Unreal Engine tools that allows them to paint, and straight out of Photoshop, it goes into the Unreal, and then they can look at it and visualize it against the set, versus a production designer that had location scouting as his background. For that production designer, we developed tools that allowed him to scout virtually, but also to invite his DP and for him to be able to see his DP in there, and to invite the producer and for him to see the producer in there, so that he can explain his world as if it was the normal way that he would do it. If you were going to make Dune, you probably would take the decision makers to the desert and talk about what would it feel like to work in a sand dune. Now you could do that virtually, right? So all that process, though, all those processes are built to allow those decision makers to make the decision. Because obviously now you're trying to get them to commit to something in pre-production, sometimes in development, like months and months before they used to do so. So understanding how they work is one of my biggest passions. I love that.
I think the topic of tools is a really great one, because what I want to talk about now is the future. I want to talk about how do you see this type of technology expanding outside of maybe the entertainment industry, and maybe a little bit about what kind of tools you've seen already in development, or ones that you would like to see in development perhaps, on how to create a more seamless integration for artists in this technology.
Put your magician's hat right now. Talk about the future.
Yeah. I'd like to see an app for producers to know what does it mean if a set decorator wants the physical set to change, or the assets in the background to change. How much time is that going to take? There's a serious domino effect that happens in this process where everyone's intertwined, and that's the app that I would like to see. Domino effect.
It's like you're in Disneyland and the app tells you the wait time on each ride.
Yeah. Are there any developers here? We have a great idea.
I think there's just so many great uses for this technology. We did a project a few months ago at this Illuminarium in Atlanta, which was a 42.
And also here, it just
here
opened.
In Vegas. 42 node cluster, something like 8,000 square feet of space, and it was all done in Unreal. And the ability to be able to quickly iterate and see those changes in such a massive landscape is just awesome. So I think, I think the uses obviously for broadcasting, the uses for TV are evident, but the uses for all sorts of other entertainment are there.
Go ahead.
With everything being faster and easier, so is engineering. Like, we're not building anything from scratch ever. Not creatively, not like tools, not like we try to find things that exist, and then all of a sudden you could build an app that goes on top. Or you can expand it. Maybe it was something built for film, but you could expand it to work for broadcast or for TV. And so that's why I'm sure all three of us have engineers local inside of the studio, because every single time a user or a person comes in, then you modify it to them. You're not starting from scratch, you're modifying it.
Absolutely. I mean, the topic of tools is like dear to our to our hearts. So, for us, we approach this traditional software development approach, right? You don't build a software for the sake of building a software. You build a software to solve a creative need, right? So for us, we're in a good spot when it comes to building tools, because we are content creators as well, right? So we kind of build not only based on our client needs, but based on our own internal pains for our content that we create. And for example, one of the things we just launched a couple months ago at HPA was one of the biggest problems that we see is review, like a tool to review assets in real time on a large scale. Like last year we did a Netflix show where they had 3,000 shots. Now, to review 3,000 shots all in Unreal Engine, you guys know how many, like each scene is like many gigabytes. To do turntables for these and send them to whoever needs to review and give feedback and do the work and do other turntables or Zoom calls and share screen and time zone difference because artists are all over the world right now. It's not really efficient and like basically we would lose hours for every day just reviewing scenes. So for us, we saw like, okay, how do we make this better? So then we came up to Felix's point, like, let's find existing tools, right? And then put together an automation between them and then build on top of it and create some sort of automated pipeline on the back end that can basically automate the asset review process. So, and basically from an artist creating an asset or making a change to an asset, pushing to Perforce, which is a source control software, then those people who have access and who are supposed to review these things get notified by email. It's a link, you click on it, it goes using pixel streaming, so it's cloud-based, to summarize it. And that cloud-based UI has a simplified version of Unreal Engine Editor. So not only you review in a 3D space, you can also do minor changes to like light and object and moving things and touching animation. Leave your comments. It creates a task to the artist, and they go back, and that flow now is all automated. Nobody needs to sit in long meetings. Nobody needs to waste hours. And you don't need powerful machines to do any of that. You can do it from your phone, on the plane, on the road, anywhere you are, right? So for us, we always try, all right, where do we find the biggest hiccups and bottlenecks in production? And can we create a tool that significantly improves the process? That's how we usually approach it.
Well, I think that was all great. I think we're going to open up to some audience questions, if everybody sounds good with that, unless anybody has any final points on the future they might like to add. Okay, I'm going to QA.
We're not futurists here.
Oh,
I know Ted Shilowitz was here earlier this morning. He's the futurist. We're not.
Oh, okay.
Excuse you.
You mentioned a viewer that you use. You mentioned goggles that you use. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, so 4 years ago, we started working on The Mandalorian Season 1. Andrew Jones is the person that really pushed us to innovate in this process. And so what we do is we have location scouts with him, just with him and an art director, and they art direct these virtual worlds together. But on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, when they're art directing together or solo and they're doing the virtual location scouting, we mail a computer to his home with an Oculus. He puts the headset on, but by the time he puts it on, we've already loaded everything up and he just arrived at Tatooine, right? Now, from there, the next step is getting the approval from the team. So a DP comes in and he lenses and he lights with a different person. And the third meeting that comes in is a multi-user virtual scout. And this is a meeting where multiple people have received computers and headsets at their homes, and they arrive, and it's like a play. Our teams are setting everything up for everyone to arrive at that room, put the headset on, and when they put it on, the production designer and the DP are ready to talk about their vision and get the production designer or get the producer to start crunching numbers and seeing how much things are going to cost. So those meetings really become a meeting of storytelling where the directors attend, the writers, production designers, DPs, all these different roles. And some of them are in VR headsets, and they could see each other and they could hear each other based on distance and spatial awareness. Others are just visiting on the screen and have the conversation just by looking at what the director, the DP, and the production designer are showing. And so those have been one of the most amazing sessions that we've put together to allow people to get to that tech viz. Because it's almost like, how do you get everyone to agree 8 months before the shoot, or even sometimes longer, because sometimes it's in development where they're just building the story. How do you get them to see the same thing? And that's a meeting that recurring meeting we introduce our clients to.
Yeah, do any of you other guys do any work specific to VR that you might like to talk about, or maybe some of the advantages you've had in your particular cases with clients?
Well, we build VR games, but we don't necessarily use VR for virtual production, not yet, at least.
No. I would say we've looked more at just using Unreal as a, in its kind of more simple form, just sharing things as videos or as 360s or stuff that people can use. I agree that VR is a really powerful previs tool.
So, virtual production, one of the coolest parts of virtual production is that all of these tools can work in tandem. So it's not just VR, it's being able to see the person in VR and the guy on an iPad framing and the guy with a puck that's a bird going like this right in front of them and the stuff, all of it in tandem, it's possible. So when we do these sessions, sometimes you have a DP that doesn't want to wear a headset. Actually, a lot of people don't want to wear a headset. So you have a DP doing it the way he loves, which might be on an iPad and framing it and moving in 3D space. But while he's moving in his own home, remotely, comfortable in 3D space, the production designer is in a headset, also seeing him virtually, framing his cameras. And so the DP and the production designer and the set decorator can all work the way that they're used to, thanks to the virtual production tools that are available. So one of the coolest parts of virtual production as a whole is this notion of things being real time, and because they're real time, everything can happen at the same time. And we apply that as much as we can, as often as we can.
And honestly, like the cool part about doing this in Unreal, because it allows you to have that multi-user function, right? I mean, there are other game engines out there that don't necessarily have it, because.
Can you explain what multi-user means?
You've been talking about it for a while.
No, but I said multi-user virtual scouts. So
yeah.
Can you explain?
Yeah, I mean, so basically for so basically for us, like when you work with game engines, right? I mean, yeah, they're real time, which is the responsiveness, right? So you trigger something and you get a response right away. With Unreal Engine, it gives you that multi-user aspect where you can have multiple people in the same session viewing the same thing, interacting with the same thing in real time, right? And the cool thing about this is, traditionally now, well, I say traditionally because the concept of virtual production, even though it's new in media entertainment, it's not really new in gaming industry. I mean, it wasn't named virtual production, like that attractive, sexy name was not there, but these processes were there. So how it evolved, though, is the ability of doing this in multi-user sessions, where you get now 3 of us, 4 of us here can get in the same session, do changes. You do set dressing, you play with camera, you do lighting. I'm just sitting cheering, and then we can all collaborate on the scene. And that's one of one of the great things Epic have been doing in responding of how the industry wants to do something.
10 years ago, when we were doing virtual production, it was out of Maya, and we had a virtual camera.
Yep.
And the DP and the director could come in and place cameras, and it was something that was a very effective tool, but it wasn't collaborative. And that's part of what's changing. When I worked in previs, it was mostly for the director's brain, and the director had a lot of influence. But then the production designer would look at that and go, oh, that's cute, director. I'm going to go redesign this whole world. And so the cool part with this process now is that the director could work the way he wants to work, and the production designer and the DP all in tandem. And that's the real-time aspect to it that Unreal is bringing.
So I just want to let everybody know we are at time. It is 5 p.m. So if you've got to go to dinner or anything, maybe run off. But if you guys have a couple more, okay, sorry. If you guys have a couple more minutes, I think it might be nice to take a couple more questions from the audience.
Thank you. I think the potential is absolutely huge, mostly in the lower budget areas. Obviously now we're talking about $500,000 or $2 million or $5 million to build these huge volumes with all the computing power that goes with it. But I'd really like to hear where you think in the short term, the next 2 years, say, where people will be able to, small studios will be able to, leverage this incredible power to create incredible things.
We are a small studio ourselves, and we don't have the money to buy that. So I'm just being frank and raw with you. And we don't even have none of that. But we do create content for it. We do optimize for it. We do build tools for it, right? The thing is, which Felix noted earlier, these walls are just one method of many in virtual production, right? So virtual production is not only LED walls or in-camera VFX stages, right? You can still do it in camera, on green screen. You can do it in a mocap session. You can do it volumetric. You can do it. There's endless way. There you can do full in-engine animation, CG. Like you can do. There are many different ways that are more accessible without having insane capital to do something like this.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it best, and Felix said the same thing. Virtual production is not an all or nothing. You could do really incredible things with a green screen and a Vive tracker. The low budget exists. If you go onto Facebook and any of the hundreds of Unreal Engine groups, if you go to some of the other booths here, like what Stipe has been doing with their green screen and some of their Unreal work, there's great stuff that can be done at all budget levels. Yeah, this stuff is super cool, without a doubt. And I'm sure at some point it'll be more ubiquitous and more available to budgets and customers of every budget level. But there's so many things that you can do right now, just with a good Unreal artist and a decent enough machine to be able to take advantage of all these things.
And even in the next 2 years, there are stages that are being built. I find that the hardest part is planning for the day, right? Renting the stage once it's built isn't going to be as expensive as you having to put $2 to $5 million to build it from scratch. However, I work on a lot of small productions as well. What I find is that they get burnt a lot because they don't prepare enough before getting it onto the day, and so unfortunately, that's a shoot. And if your world isn't ready, you're going to have to redo that work in post, or you're going to have to go fix that and rent that space again. So finding the right team that's going to help you plan this appropriately, and now that things are opening up and that there's these smaller units opening up, I think it's going to be quite accessible to a lot more smaller budget products in the next couple of years.
And on the planning point, which Dan also brought up earlier, you don't necessarily, first of all, it's very cool, but it's also very limited in terms of what you can shoot on it. So the planning part is critical because this is not suitable for everything, right? So it's all about finding the right way to shoot what you want to shoot based on your end result and based on the medium you're planning to release on. And then, it's also a business case, okay, is it worth it? Or I can go, by the way, even Moses, I don't know if they're doing it here on HPA, I saw they were doing in-camera real-time compositing on green screen. It was incredible. It looks absolutely incredible. So there's a lot of tricks now. At the end of the day, what matters is not how you did it. It matters of when you see the final footage, is it amazing or not? It doesn't, this will get you a lot of PR probably, but what you care about is the final footage amazing?
But leaning into that PR, because I think I mentioned FOMO earlier.
Yeah, well, yeah.
What I tell people it is cool to engage with it, and honestly, you should want to have it in your projects to get the experience, right? You can get that promo from having one shot, and that's it, and showing the stage, right? You don't need to make 50% of your TV show or 20%. You can just get one shot, and then people will think you made the whole thing using that tech. There you go.
And that's what happened most of the time.
That's what happened most of the time. Yeah, I used in-camera VFX, but then you don't measure what else you used.
It's not important.
Don't worry about it. Okay, we got a couple more, and then yeah. Hi.
Ain't that the truth?
We are talking about post moving into pre-production and all those kind of things. Now, to do a proper virtual production using whether a screen, LED screen or green screen or whatever is there a certain type of workflow we need to follow in terms of like if I'm doing a feature film in a traditional way? First, okay, I find my idea, write the script, then have a team, we go to location scout, and so on and so forth. In what way is it any way different in doing a virtual production? What are the different stages we have to follow?
Honestly, I think the stages are pretty similar, almost identical. It's just that they move way faster, and you're going to need a different kind of team.
Yes.
So but if you're gonna make and they all happen in tandem, but if you understand the roles that are in a film, you're gonna be able to grab those roles and translate it to virtual production. Just remember that in film, you're like this, and you're gonna be like this. So that's when the conversation happens, where it's like, hey, I know that you thought that these people weren't gonna come on board until 2 months later, and you're gonna have time to play. But no, they're actually going to come on board way earlier, and you have to have conversations around what that means. So I think that getting everyone used to with the fact that things are happening in tandem is more of the difficulty, and then replicating the normal thing.
Which is critical, because like in pre-production, you have developers working on the pipeline and optimizing it. You have artists creating art and assets and environments and worlds and all of that. You have like DP and director working on their stuff, and you have, you go through the visualization process, all of it. And you also have to certain level, if you're doing tests, for example, like vertical slice or something, you have editors even involved at that stage, which is crazy. But yeah, that's what's going to happen, is basically everybody is there from the start. It's the same steps.
I think this will be our last question.
Yeah, this is regarding photogrammetry asset creation. Are they really comfortable to do the relighting when you do the photogrammetry capturing?
Are they comfortable doing the what?
Relighting, like.
Oh, the relight. Are you talking about the artist or the client?
Client. Like if I do the photogrammetry, because I cannot avoid shadows, and so if I relight, if I want to do the relight in the actual Unreal Engine, so how comfortable is that?
I mean, there is an education stage. I think let's say if I was going to bring a DP, because you're talking about DP, right? When I engage with DPs and I go, hey, do you know about virtual production? The first thing they go is, oh, this is a completely new thing. I'm going to have to learn some, and once you sit down and you go, no, you know how you relit the real life thing? We're just going to have a person that's going to do that with you virtually. I think communicating that to them is what gets them to lean in and go, oh, photogrammetry is cool. If you say photogrammetry and cleanup and all these things, that doesn't mean anything to them.
Yep.
They don't understand that.
It's a technical process.
It's a vocabulary.
Yeah.
Speak their language, and they're going to understand it a lot easier.
And just to your knowledge, with photogrammetry, you're collecting data and like polygons, data points. So then you can do whatever the hell you want with it, basically. So you relight it, you do whatever. But most importantly, to his point, don't use complex technical terminologies with creatives, otherwise you're going to lose them.
All right, well, I think we're a little bit over. Thank you so much to everyone for coming, and thank you to our incredible panelists for that great conversation. Please come back tomorrow for some more great panels and some demos. We have nothing scheduled after this, so if we have some more questions, everyone wants to come up, we'll be here. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, guys.